The building stood tall and shiny in the middle of the city, made of glass and steel, reflecting the sky like a mirror. Inside, everything looked perfect: clean floors, modern furniture, and people walking quickly with files and tablets in their hands. This place belonged to a powerful woman, the CEO of a large company. She had worked hard to reach this position, at least that was the story she liked to tell. She believed she was smarter than most people around her. Her success had made her confident, but over time, that confidence had slowly turned into pride. She believed power meant control, and control meant never being questioned. Everyone in the office knew her reputation. She was sharp, demanding, and rarely patient. Meetings followed her rules, decisions were made quickly, and mistakes were not tolerated. People respected her, but many also feared her. She liked it that way. To her, respect and fear were almost the same. That morning, she arrived in her luxury car, a symbol of her success. The car was expensive, powerful, and custom-made, just like her image. As she pulled into the company parking area, she expected everything to work smoothly, just like always. But something went wrong. The engine made a strange sound, loud and rough. The car shook slightly, then stopped. No matter how many times she tried, it would not start again. Her calm expression faded, replaced by irritation. She stepped out of the car, heels clicking sharply against the ground. Her assistants rushed toward her, asking if everything was okay. She waved them away, clearly annoyed. This was not how her day was supposed to begin. To her, machines were simple: they either worked or they failed, and when they failed, someone else fixed them. She expected quick solutions, not problems. A call was made to bring in a mechanic, someone who could handle the issue. As she waited, she stood near the car, arms crossed, eyes full of impatience. Employees passing by slowed their steps, curious but careful not to stare too much. She looked around at the people working under her, judging silently. In her mind, she had earned her place at the top. She believed others were there because they lacked ambition, intelligence, or discipline. This belief made her feel superior, untouchable. When she thought about workers who fixed things with their hands, she saw them as lower-level people, necessary, but not impressive. She valued boardrooms more than workshops, suits more than uniforms, titles more than skills. As time passed, her frustration grew. She hated waiting. Waiting made her feel powerless, and she did not like that feeling at all. She checked her watch again and sighed loudly, drawing attention to herself. In her world, everything moved according to her schedule. Finally, she was told that a mechanic had arrived. She turned quickly, ready to give instructions, already assuming she knew more than the person who had come to help. She expected someone nervous, eager to please. She expected obedience. What she did not realize was that this moment, this small inconvenience with a broken engine, was about to challenge her entire way of thinking. At that point, she still believed she was in control. She believed money, status, and position made her better than others. She believed pride was strength. Standing there beside her silent car, surrounded by glass walls and quiet respect, she had no idea that her power was about to be tested, not in a meeting room, not through numbers or contracts, but through something far simpler: a machine, a challenge, and a man she was about to underestimate. The mechanic arrived quietly, without any announcement or attention. He parked his old service truck a short distance away and stepped out slowly, wiping his hands on a worn cloth. His clothes were clean but simple, stained slightly with oil from years of honest work. His face was calm, focused, and unreadable. He looked at the luxury car for a moment, then at the building, tall and shining, and finally at the woman standing beside the vehicle, arms crossed, clearly impatient. He had seen places like this before, and people like her too. The CEO glanced at him from head to toe. Her eyes paused for just a second longer than necessary. She noticed his uniform, his dark skin, his quiet manner, and in her mind, she made a decision before he even spoke. She did not hide her doubt. "You're the mechanic?" she asked, her tone sharp and questioning, as if the answer could not possibly be yes. He nodded politely and introduced himself. His voice was steady and respectful. He asked what the problem was and if he could take a look at the engine. She let out a small laugh, not a friendly one, more like disbelief. "Do you really think you can handle a car like this?" she said, gesturing toward the vehicle. "This isn't some old truck." The words were meant to cut, to remind him of his place. People nearby slowed their steps, pretending not to listen but hearing every word. The mechanic did not react, he did not argue or defend himself, he simply nodded again and asked for the keys. His calm response seemed to irritate her even more. She hesitated, then handed them over sharply. "Fine," she said, "but don't waste my time." As he opened the hood, she stood back, watching closely, ready to criticize every move. In her mind, she had already decided he would fail. She believed skill came from education, from offices and titles, not from hands covered in grease. The mechanic studied the engine carefully, his eyes moved slowly, observing details others might miss. He listened to the sounds, checked connections, and ran his fingers along parts with quiet confidence. The CEO whispered to one of her assistants, shaking her head slightly. "I don't know why they sent him," she said, loud enough for him to hear. "This car needs a specialist." Still, the mechanic remained focused. Years of experience had taught him patience. He had learned long ago that proving people wrong was easier through work than words. As minutes passed, she grew restless. She checked her phone, sighed loudly, and made sarcastic comments about deadlines and wasted time. Each remark was meant to remind him that she believed he did not belong there. But the mechanic stayed silent, his hands moved with purpose, every action calm and precise. He was not rushed by her impatience, he respected machines too much for that. People nearby began to notice the contrast, her sharp words and tense posture against his quiet focus and steady movements. At one point, she stepped closer and asked, "Do you even know what you're looking at?" He looked up at her politely and answered simply, "Yes, ma'am," then returned to his work. That short response unsettled her. She expected excuses, not confidence. In her world, confidence was shown through loud voices and strong titles. She did not understand this quiet kind. She crossed her arms again, watching him closely now, no longer amused, something else beginning to form, uncertainty. The mechanic continued working, ignoring the weight of her judgment. He had been underestimated his entire life, and each time, he had learned to let his work speak instead. What the CEO did not realize was that her mockery was building the very moment that would soon humble her. She believed she was watching a man struggle. In reality, she was watching someone who knew exactly what he was doing, and the challenge she was about to turn into a joke would soon become something she could never forget. The moment that changed everything did not begin with anger, it began with laughter, a sharp, careless laugh that cut through the air and drew attention from everyone nearby. The CEO watched the mechanic work for a while, arms crossed, lips tight with impatience, and then she shook her head slowly, as if she had already reached her conclusion. "This is pointless," she said loudly, making sure others could hear. "I don't know why I expected anything different." A few employees nearby exchanged uncomfortable glances. They knew her tone, they had heard it before in meetings when someone disappointed her, but this time, it was directed at a man who had not done anything wrong. The mechanic continued working, pretending not to hear. He focused on the engine, listening carefully, adjusting a component with slow precision, but her words kept coming. "You know," she said, letting out another laugh, "this car costs more than most people make in years." She looked directly at him now. "I doubt you've ever worked on something like this." The words were meant to embarrass him, to remind him of the gap she believed existed between them, power and labor, wealth and work. Some people smiled awkwardly, unsure how to react, others looked down, uncomfortable with the way she spoke, but no one said anything. The mechanic finally straightened up and wiped his hands on his cloth. He looked at her calmly, his expression was neutral, not angry, not hurt, just steady. "Ma'am," he said politely, "I just need a little more time." That was when she laughed again, louder this time, almost mocking. "Time?" she repeated. "I don't have time for this." She paused, then smirked, an idea forming in her mind. "Tell you what," she said, her voice playful but cruel, "if you fix this engine, I'll marry you." The words hung in the air. For a second, no one reacted, then a few people laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, others froze, shocked by how far she had gone. The challenge was not serious, at least not to her. To her, it was entertainment, a way to show dominance, to turn his effort into a joke and herself into the center of attention. The mechanic did not smile, he did not laugh, He did not look offended either, he simply looked at her, studying her face for a brief moment, as if trying to understand what kind of person would say such a thing. "You think this is funny?" she added, raising an eyebrow. "Go on, prove me wrong." Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. People waited for him to react, to protest, to walk away, to say something sharp. Instead, he nodded. "All right," he said calmly, "I'll fix it." The response caught her off guard. She had expected anger or embarrassment, not agreement. She laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "Good luck," she said, waving her hand dismissively, "you're going to need it." She stepped back, clearly satisfied, believing she had just made a joke at his expense. The mechanic turned back to the engine without another word. He did not rush, he did not show off, he worked the same way he always did, carefully, patiently, with respect for the machine. But something had changed. The people watching felt it. The challenge had turned the moment serious, no longer just a repair, it was now a test. The CEO watched him closely now, a confident smile still on her face, but beneath it, something else stirred, curiosity, maybe even doubt. She believed she had set an impossible task, something designed to fail, something that would prove her point. What she did not realize was that she had just challenged a man who had spent his life being underestimated, a man who had learned long ago that the best answer to disrespect was success. As the mechanic leaned deeper into the engine, tightening a bolt and adjusting a connection others had ignored, the laughter around them slowly faded. The joke had been made, the challenge had been spoken. Now, all that remained was to see who would be proven wrong. He did not raise his voice after the challenge was spoken, he did not argue, defend himself, or react the way many expected. Instead, the mechanic took a slow breath and returned his full attention to the engine, as if the cruel words had never been said. That calm response confused the people watching more than anger ever could. While the CEO stood back with a confident smile, believing she had already won, the mechanic opened his toolbox and laid his tools out carefully. Each movement was slow and deliberate, showing years of habit and discipline. He treated the engine with respect, not as a way to prove a point, but as something that deserved understanding. He leaned in closer, listening carefully, not just with his ears, but with experience. He checked connections others would ignore, traced wires with his fingers, and studied the engine as if it were telling him a story. His face showed focus, not pressure. The people nearby began to quiet down, the laughter faded, replaced by curiosity. There was something different about the way he worked. He did not rush to impress anyone, he did not complain about the difficulty, he simply worked. The CEO watched from a distance, arms still crossed, but her smile slowly tightened. She expected frustration, mistakes, or excuses. Instead, she saw patience, she saw confidence without arrogance, and it unsettled her. Every now and then, she made a small comment, questioning his choices or reminding him of how expensive the car was, but he did not respond, he did not look up. His silence was not weakness, it was focus. Minutes passed, then more. The sun shifted slightly above the glass building, casting light across the car. The mechanic wiped his hands, adjusted a part deep inside the engine, and stepped back briefly to think. That pause made the CEO laugh again. "Giving up already?" she asked, her voice sharp. He looked at her calmly and shook his head. "Just thinking," he said, then turned back to the engine. That simple answer frustrated her more than any argument could have. As time passed, small signs of progress appeared. A connection tightened, a loose part replaced, a problem identified that others had missed. A few employees began whispering to each other, pointing quietly, their interest growing. The mechanic moved with confidence now, his hands sure, his actions precise. It became clear that he was not guessing, he knew what he was doing. The CEO checked her phone again, then looked up, irritation creeping into her expression. She was no longer entertained, she was uncomfortable. She had expected failure, she had expected to feel superior, but now she felt something else, doubt. The mechanic finally closed the hood and wiped his hands. He did not smile, he did not celebrate, he simply stepped back and took a breath. "Try it now," he said calmly, handing her the keys. The moment stretched, people leaned forward slightly, the air felt tight with anticipation. She hesitated for just a second before taking the keys. That hesitation spoke louder than words. As she stepped toward the driver's seat, her confidence was no longer as strong as before. The challenge she had made as a joke now felt very real. The mechanic stood quietly nearby, not watching her face, but the car, trusting his work. In that moment, the power in the space had shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly. What began as mockery had turned into a test of truth, and the woman who believed she controlled everything was about to learn whether pride or skill would win. The CEO turned the key with confidence, expecting the engine to fail, expecting the moment to end with her laughter and his embarrassment, but instead of silence or grinding noise, the engine came alive smoothly, strong and steady. The sound filled the space like a quiet announcement, clear and undeniable. For a second, she froze, her hand still on the key, her smile faded, replaced by confusion. She tried again, turning the engine off and on. The car responded perfectly, as if nothing had ever been wrong. A strange silence followed, no laughter, no comments, just the steady sound of the engine running. People around them stared in disbelief, some leaned closer, others exchanged shocked looks, a few smiled quietly, impressed by what they had just witnessed. The mechanic stood nearby, calm and composed. He did not raise his arms in victory, he did not say, "I told you so." He simply wiped his hands and watched the engine, listening carefully, making sure everything was working exactly as it should. The CEO stepped out of the car slowly, her heels touching the ground with less confidence than before. She looked at the mechanic, then at the car, then back at him again. Her mind struggled to catch up with reality. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice no longer sharp. He answered simply, explaining the issue in clear words. He talked about a hidden fault, a damaged connection, and a part that others had overlooked. His explanation was calm, technical, and precise. It was clear that he did not guess, he understood the machine deeply. As he spoke, the people listening realized something important. This man did not just fix engines, he understood them, he respected them, he saw problems where others saw confusion. The CEO listened quietly, something she rarely did. She asked a few questions, not sarcastic this time, but curious. Her tone had changed completely. She had mocked him moments earlier, believing skill came from status and appearance, but now she was forced to face the truth. Real skill came from experience, patience, and dedication. The mechanic showed her the faulty part, explaining how it caused the engine to fail. He spoke without pride, without arrogance, just facts, just knowledge. People who had once laughed now stood silent, embarrassed by their earlier reactions. They had judged him too quickly, just like she had. The CEO crossed her arms again, but this time not in defiance. It was a habit, a shield. She was processing something uncomfortable. "You really fixed it," she said finally, more to herself than to him. "Yes, ma'am," he replied politely. That simple answer carried more weight than any argument could have. She remembered her words, the cruel joke, the challenge she had thrown like an insult, and now those words echoed in her mind, no longer funny, no longer harmless. The mechanic packed his tools carefully, taking his time. He had done his job, there was no rush now. People began to look at him differently, not as the mechanic, but as a professional, a master of his craft, someone who deserved respect. The CEO felt it too, that shift, that moment when control slips away and truth stands firm. She had believed power came from wealth and position, but standing there beside her running car, she saw another kind of power, quiet, earned, and undeniable. The engine continued to run smoothly, like proof that could not be ignored. What had started as mockery had turned into a lesson written in sound and motion. And for the first time that day, the CEO said nothing at all, because there was nothing left to doubt. The silence that followed felt heavier than any insult spoken earlier. The engine continued to run smoothly in the background, steady and confident, like it was proving a point all by itself. The CEO stood still, her thoughts loud inside her mind, but her mouth quiet. She looked around and noticed the change in people's faces. The same employees who had once smiled awkwardly or looked away were now watching the mechanic with respect. Some nodded slightly, others whispered in low voices. The room no longer belonged to her alone. For the first time in a long while, she felt exposed, not because she had failed, but because she had been wrong, and everyone had seen it. She cleared her throat and straightened her posture, trying to regain control. Old habits die hard. She asked how much she owed him. Her tone was formal, professional, as if money could erase what had just happened. The mechanic calmly named a fair price, nothing exaggerated, nothing dramatic, just honest work for honest pay. She paused again, surprised by that too. She expected arrogance after success, but found none. As she handed over the payment, her hand hesitated slightly. The words she had spoken earlier replayed in her mind, the joke, the laughter, the disrespect. They no longer felt small or harmless. "About what I said earlier," she began, then stopped. The mechanic looked at her patiently, waiting. He did not rush her, he did not push for an apology, he simply stood there, giving her space to face herself. People nearby sensed the moment and grew quiet. This was no longer about an engine, it was about character. She took a breath and spoke again, this time more slowly. "That was wrong," she said. Her voice was softer, less controlled, more real. "I disrespected you." The words felt unfamiliar on her tongue. She was not used to admitting mistakes, especially in public. The mechanic nodded slightly, acknowledging her words. He did not demand more, he did not lecture. His response was simple: "I'm just here to do my job." That answer struck her harder than anger would have. She realized then that true confidence did not need to put others down, it did not need to mock or challenge, it simply existed, steady and sure. Around them, people slowly returned to their tasks, but the atmosphere had changed. Something important had happened, something that could not be undone. The CEO watched as the mechanic packed his tools and closed his toolbox, every movement calm, practiced, and respectful. He had arrived as someone she underestimated, and now he was leaving as someone she would not forget. She wanted to say more, to fix the moment the way he had fixed the engine, but she understood that some things could not be repaired with words alone. As he turned to leave, she spoke again. "You're very good at what you do." He smiled politely, just briefly. "Thank you," he said, then walked toward his truck. She watched him go, standing beside her perfectly working car, feeling smaller than she had that morning, not weaker, but humbled. That feeling stayed with her long after the sound of his truck faded. It followed her into meetings, into quiet moments, into thoughts she could not push away. She realized that leadership without respect was empty, that power without humility was fragile. That day marked a turning point, not because of a broken engine, but because of a broken belief, the belief that success gave her the right to judge others. The mechanic returned to his work elsewhere, carrying nothing but his tools and his dignity, unchanged by her status, unshaken by her words. And the CEO, standing in her world of glass and steel, began to understand that real strength does not come from looking down on others, it comes from knowing when to look inward instead. The story did not end when the mechanic drove away. In many ways, that was only the beginning. The moment stayed in the CEO's mind long after the parking lot emptied and the building returned to its usual rhythm. Inside her office, surrounded by glass walls and quiet efficiency, she found it hard to focus. The engine had been fixed, the problem solved, yet something inside her remained unsettled. The confidence she once carried so easily now felt heavier, questioned by her own reflection. She replayed the scene again and again, the joke she had made, the laughter, the way she had looked at him before he even touched the engine. Each memory landed differently now, stripped of pride and full of discomfort. For years, she had believed she was fair. She told herself that she judged people by results, not by appearances, yet that day had proven otherwise. The truth was uncomfortable, but impossible to ignore. Later that afternoon, during a leadership meeting, she found herself listening more than speaking, something her team noticed immediately. She asked questions instead of giving commands. She paused before responding, considering perspectives she might once have dismissed. Her assistants exchanged quiet looks, sensing a shift. The lesson from the parking lot followed her everywhere, into emails she rewrote with softer language, into decisions she reconsidered, into conversations where she chose respect over authority. Word of the incident spread quietly through the company, not as gossip, but as a moment people reflected on. Some employees felt relieved, others felt inspired, many felt seen. The mechanic, meanwhile, returned to his normal life. His day continued like any other, tools in hand, engines waiting to be fixed. He did not brag about what had happened, he did not seek recognition. For him, the work itself had always been enough. But those around him noticed something too, a quiet pride, not loud or boastful, but steady, the kind that comes from knowing your worth without needing to prove it. Back at the company, the CEO made a decision that surprised many. She ordered a review of how vendors, contractors, and service workers were treated. She insisted on respect across all levels, not as a public gesture, but as a private standard. Some people questioned the change, others welcomed it, but no one could deny that something had shifted at the top. Weeks later, she requested the mechanic by name, not to fix another problem, but to thank him properly. When he arrived, the interaction was different, no mockery, no challenge, just professionalism. She apologized again, this time without witnesses, without pride. The words were honest, and that honesty mattered. He accepted simply, not because he needed it, but because growth deserves acknowledgement. Their paths did not cross often after that, but the impact remained. The mechanic carried forward with his work, unchanged by her wealth, unshaken by her former arrogance, grounded in skill and self-respect. The CEO carried forward with a lesson that reshaped her leadership. She learned that authority is not proven by humiliation, and respect is not demanded, it is earned. For everyone who heard the story, it became something more than an incident, it became a reminder. Never judge skill by appearance, never confuse power with worth, and never underestimate someone who works quietly, because sometimes, the strongest answers come not from words, but from results. In the end, there was no marriage, no dramatic ending, just something far more meaningful, growth, humility, and a lesson that lasted longer than any engine ever could. Time passed, and what happened that day slowly turned into a story people remembered for a long time. It was told in workshops, offices, and quiet conversations, not because it was dramatic, but because it felt real. The mechanic went back to his routine, waking up early, fixing engines, getting his hands dirty. His life did not suddenly change on the outside, but something inside him felt lighter. He had faced disrespect and walked away with dignity. He had proven his skill without raising his voice, and that mattered to him more than applause. People who worked with him noticed it too. Customers listened more closely when he spoke. Younger mechanics watched him with new respect. He never bragged about what happened, but when asked, he simply said that hard work always speaks for itself. The CEO's life also moved forward, but not in the same way as before. She became more aware of her words, her tone, and her assumptions. She started noticing the people she once overlooked, the security guard at the door, the cleaning staff at night, the technicians behind the scenes. Small changes added up. She listened more, interrupted less, and questioned her own reactions. Sometimes she failed, sometimes old habits returned, but now she noticed them, and that awareness made a difference. The company culture slowly shifted, not because of a policy or a speech, but because behavior at the top had changed. Respect became something practiced, not just written in rules. The story spread beyond the company too. Friends told friends, co-workers told families. It became an example people used when talking about judging others too quickly. For some, it was a lesson about class; for others, about race; for many, it was about humility. The mechanic never saw the moment as a victory over someone else. To him, it was a victory over doubt, the doubt placed on him by others, and sometimes by the world itself. The CEO never forgot the sound of that engine starting. It stayed with her, a reminder that pride can be loud, but truth is steady. Years later, the moment still mattered, not because of the words spoken in mockery, but because of the silence that followed when skill proved itself. People who heard the story often focused on the challenge, the joke, the embarrassment, but those who understood focused on the ending, a man doing his job well, and a woman learning something she did not expect. There was no dramatic ending, no public celebration, no promise kept or broken, and that made the story stronger. It ended quietly, like real life often does, with understanding, growth, and a lesson carried forward. The engine was fixed, but something else had been repaired too, a broken belief, a narrow view, a moment of pride replaced by perspective. And long after the tools were packed away and the parking lot cleared, The impact remained, living on in changed behavior, quiet respect, and the reminder that no matter how powerful someone seems, true value is revealed through actions, not assumptions.